We all know there's no such thing as a stupid question, right? But that's especially true for one of our new segments dedicated to the rabbit holes and plot twists from the world of pop culture. Let's learn a little something fun today for our latest pop quiz. And it's no pop culture story without friend of ITL, Casey Mendoza. Casey, what's up?
Christian, it's great to be back, but before I reveal the latest pop quiz question, I need to ask you a quick question and be honest. How old were you in 2001 and who was your favorite musician back then?
If I'm counting correctly, I was 13, turning 14 in 2001. I don't know if I had a favorite musician, but that was a pretty bomb year for neo soul and R&B. You had Alicia Keys, you had Music Soul Child, and I think I was still kind of like riding off the fumes of Outkast's Stankonia album, which came out the year before.
I love how you were kind of like, you were always a cool kid, and for that, I'm a little bit jealous. The reason I ask this question is because the company we're talking about today first launched in 2001, and you might remember some of their commercials.
And now they're all together on Kidz Bop. Kidz Bop, 30 of today's biggest songs made just for kids.
So as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, what neighborhood is that? And what were people thinking as they were driving by?
You know, I hope that brought back some memories. And the question for today is, who is Kidz Bop actually for?
I mean, tell me, who was Kidz Bop for?
We're talking about Kidz Bop because it's one of the most recognizable brands in this multi-billion-dollar market for children's entertainment. We fell into some pretty deep rabbit holes and learned a little bit about music licensing laws, a little bit about moral panic and censorship history, and then ultimately a lot about what it means to create safe media environments for children. I clearly don't need to explain what Kidz Bop is to you, Christian, but for those who don't know, Kidz Bop is this music brand that takes popular songs from artists like Britney Spears or Outkast, changes the lyrics to make it more kid-friendly, and then has kids sing the altered songs. Over the past decade, Kidz Bop has become this incredibly lucrative brand, recording around 900 different songs, selling more than 22 million albums, and generating more than 1.2 billion streams on Spotify. 24 Kidz Bop albums have also debuted in the top 10 of the Billboard 200, which is surprisingly more than Bob Dylan, Elton John, and Bruce Springsteen. And you know, this was especially wild to learn, but some of Kidz Bop's most notable alumni include Ross Lynch, Olivia Holt, Becky G, and Emmy Award-winning actress Zendaya.
And you overthink, always speak cryptically.
So I just finished watching Euphoria, and I gotta say, she's come a long way, man. This is where it must have started for her, and then you get to Euphoria. It's kind of wild to see this.
So I also just finished Euphoria, and that is almost like the anti-Kidz Bop.
You know, how does Kidz Bop get actual permission to alter and cover these songs?
That is a great first question because it has one of the simpler answers to today's questions.
Right to arrange is basically the right to create derivative work. And we've all seen plenty of Beatles cover bands and that sort of thing. But it's when you start claiming to be the original that you can run into trouble.
Yeah, I won't get into the legal nitty-gritty, but as long as Kidz Bop pays, the necessary royalty licenses, streaming fees to the original copyright holders, they're allowed to alter music as much as they want. And when they perform that music live, like they have throughout several of their US tours, they really just need to make sure they're clear to audiences that they're not the original artists.
Okay, that's all really good to know, but if I were the original artist, let's say I was, a Billboard Hot 100 artist, like, could I complain about this?
Oh, you can always complain, but you probably won't get anywhere. And at least publicly, the only artist we saw even acknowledge their music's kid-friendly counterpart was Lil Nas X tweeting this screenshot of Kidz Bop's sanitized cover of his song Montero.
Wait, Kidz Bop covered Montero? Like, are we thinking about the same Montero? Was there another Montero out there?
The very same Montero you're thinking about. And yeah, we're gonna get into that. Because ultimately, Kidz Bop and this entire market of kid-friendly entertainment, it exists just as much for adults.
With Kidz Bop, you'll never stop.
Kidz Bop is the epitome of kid-friendly, and at first listen, it's not hard to understand why the brand exists.
It's a clean way to introduce your kids to popular music.
When Kidz Bop debuted in 2001, it was this sort of compromise for parents who didn't want to listen to kids' music, but also didn't want their kids to hear certain lyrics from popular artists.
And I think a lot of that came from so much commercial television having so much sexual content or drinking, drugs, and smoking, and parents feeling like, I just don't really want my kids seeing all that or hearing all that.
In 2001, an FTC report found that nearly half of the theaters sold tickets to R-rated movies to underage moviegoers, while 90% of the music retailers sold explicit content recordings to the underage shoppers. Because of that, you could argue Kidz Bop came out during a time of heightened scrutiny over pop culture and its effects on children, but the truth is these concerns from adults have been around for decades.
Certain rock music that is now being sold deals very explicitly with sexual subjects.
There's always been this kind of conservative element of concern about the welfare of children.
In the 80s, the Parents Music Resource Center formed and heavily criticized artists like Madonna, Prince, and Motley Crue for singing songs with lyrics deemed profane, violent, or sexually explicit.
In fact, they look like they should be in Playboy or Penthouse.
The group was formed by prominent Washington, D.C. women, including Tipper Gore, who was married to future Vice President Al Gore. Their work is the reason the parental advisory label is now put on albums with explicit lyrics and adult content.
They were making all these kind of psychological arguments that this music was, having incredibly damning effects to our generation.
The Parents Music Resource Center shut down in the 90s, but their influence can be seen in today's demands for family-friendly media, a term that varies across different groups.
I think in some cases it means heavily edited, a little more washed of any kind of controversial like sexual content or swearing. Family friendly can also kind of skew very conservative.
Several outlets today help review and recommend media for parents. Parent Previews and Kids in Mind contextualize movie violence, substance abuse, language, and sexual content. Outlets like Common Sense Media offer similar context on films, TV shows, books, and video games, and the resource also gives advice on how to engage with kids about the media they're consuming.
We're not really looking to censor content. We're really looking to get kids and families talking about challenging topics and using media as an entry point to do that.
These outlets are typically politically neutral and non-religious, but several others, like Plugged In or Dove, are socially conservative and Christian. Beyond scrutinizing explicit content, they also review media on how they represent conservative Christian values, including criticizing pieces of media that include LGBTQ characters. So, how do all these different outlets and critics review Kidz Bop? It's negative on both ends. Liberal-leaning listeners criticize the brand for removing LGBTQ references in songs like Lil Nas X's Montero or Lady Gaga's Born This Way. Conservative-leaning listeners criticize the brand for covering artists like Lil Nas X or Lady Gaga in the first place. And lastly, other critics argue that Kidz Bop's sanitized lyrics don't actually sanitize the adult messages.
The ultimate themes of the original artist are not really whitewashed very well.
Songs like Rihanna's Love on the Brain or Britney Spears' Toxic, for example, are still about adult romantic relationships, even with Kidz Bop's cleaned up lyrics. And kids do pick up on that.
There are issues that kids are aware of and that are around kids even if it isn't specifically what parents are curating for their kids.
Because of that, some children's media experts and psychologists say it's more important to actively pay attention to kids' media, co-view or watch things with them, and have conversations about it, rather than just passively play sanitized media for them. Projects like the Committee for Children's podcast Imagine Neighborhood was created with co-listening in mind.
To ignore it without engaging in a conversation feels like a missed opportunity.
It gives an opportunity to, understand what your child is listening to, how they're processing that information.
The good news is that there's so many more options for kids today, including entire streaming platforms, and so many more guides and resources for parents. Okay, now that we're back and we've learned a lot about Kidz Bop and this market for kid-friendly entertainment, we're gonna play a trivia game.
I'm very interested to see how badly I'm gonna do with this trivia game.
So with this game, we're gonna look at lyrics from Kidz Bop songs, and all I need you to do is guess the original song or, even the original artist. We'll give you half points if you can guess one of them. Are you ready?
As ready as I'm gonna be.
So the very first Kidz Bop lyric is, I wanna lie on the beach in Hawaii. I want that jet lag from livin' and flyin'.
I have absolutely no idea. I have no idea.
The original song is Montero by Lil Nas X.
Totally unrecognizable.
This next one is just one line, and it's a little bit older. Will your mouth still remember the look of my love?
Will your mouth still remember the look of my love?
For kids. This is the Kidz Bop lyric.
This is not for kids. Is this a Katy Perry song?
It is Thinking Out Loud by Ed Sheeran.
Casey, give me something so I can redeem myself.
There is one more, and I think it might actually be the hardest one, and I'm so sorry. It is only one line, and I just need you to guess either the song title or the artist or both. It is We're Kidz Bop and We're Taking Over. They name drop themselves.
We're Kidz Bop and We're Taking Over. Is this a Kesha song? No. I've done so poorly. Who is this?
This is Nicki Minaj.
Oh, man. I feel that this is probably my worst showing, but it's okay. It's okay because this is something our audiences have come to expect out of me. Casey, thanks so much for another installment of Pop Quiz, and I'm looking forward to doing this again next time. Thanks so much for that, Casey. Always a good time with our friends of the show, even when they're trying to embarrass me.